When Naomi looked at me in that shimmering hallway filled with white roses and laughter, when she tilted her chin ever so slightly and said, in a voice as cold as the metal on a surgeon's table, "What are you doing here?" It was as if something inside me cracked straight down the middle. I had crossed 3 states for my own daughter's wedding, but in that moment, I felt like an intruder in a dream that wasn't mine. The music hummed in the background like it was coming from underwater. I stood there, clutching the small clutch purse I had bought secondhand at the church thrift sale, my hands trembling just a little, my breath suddenly too loud in my ears. And before I could even gather the strength to answer, she turned away. She turned away from me. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe so I can share more stories with you. The chandelier light glittered on her gown as she faced her bridesmaids again, laughing softly at something one of them whispered. Not a hint of the child I had raised lingered in her eyes when she finally glanced back at me. It was like looking at a stranger who vaguely resembled my daughter, the way a distant cousin sometimes looks familiar in the jawline, but not in the heart. My smile, the one I had carefully practiced that morning in the mirror before leaving the motel, slipped right off my face. I felt it die. I stood there long enough for my feet to ache and my eyes to sting. No one approached me. No one said, "Oh, you must be the bride's mother. Come this way." I was invisible, floating through that hall like a ghost who had mistaken the date of her own funeral. I tried to make sense of what had just happened. I tried to understand how a girl I once held through nightmares, a girl I once rocked after her father died, could look at me with the warmth of a landlord discovering an unpaid tenant. The coldness of her tone lingered in my chest long after she had stepped away. It was a strange kind of cold, the kind that does not sting right away. It sinks in slowly, as if the heart resists the truth just long enough to pretend, to hope, to deny. I started to move, my legs heavy, my breath uneven, weaving my way through guests who were too busy admiring floral centerpieces to notice an old woman dying quietly inside her own ribcage. The ceremony was about to begin. Guests were being ushered to their seats. Rows of chairs lined the hall in perfectly symmetrical patterns, each one tied with silk ribbon and a single white rose. But there was no seat for me. I scanned the names printed on delicate ivory place cards. I looked for Mabel Robinson, though I already knew it would not be there. Names of business partners, names of Edward's colleagues, names of Naomi's new friends from Austin, some relatives from his side who seemed to glide across the floor like they knew they belonged. But not me. Not the woman who brought this child into the world. Not the woman who stayed awake on countless nights praying for her. Not the woman who sent money every month like a lifeline wrapped in motherly guilt and hope. There was no space carved out for me in this new life Naomi had built. So I stood at the back, quiet, straight-backed, invisible. I tried to keep my breathing steady as the music swelled, but each note seemed to press against the inside of my chest, making it harder to stay upright. When the doors opened and Naomi walked out holding Edward's arm, radiant and glowing like she had been carved out of pure light, I felt pride trying to rise inside me. But it had to fight its way through so much hurt that it barely survived. She looked beautiful, and I felt small. I whispered her name under my breath, "Naomi?" hoping maybe the sound of it would stabilize something inside me, but it only made my throat tighten. She drifted down the aisle like a floating dream I could never again reach. Guests leaned in, smiled, dabbed tears, whispered how lucky Edward was. I tried to hold on to something steady. The years of bedtime stories, the first day of kindergarten, the way she used to cling to my skirt when thunderstorms rolled across Savannah. But the girl walking toward the altar wasn't that child. Or maybe she was, buried somewhere under the layers of silk and distance. I don't remember much of the vows, only that Edward spoke too loudly and Naomi laughed too softly. The whole event felt choreographed, rehearsed, polished, everything except the part where the bride's mother watched from the shadows. When they kissed, a ripple of applause burst through the room. People rose to their feet, hands clapping in smooth waves. I clapped too. A small, hollow clap that no one heard. Then the world blurred. I couldn't tell if it was my eyes or the room itself, but something bent, something wavered. As soon as the ceremony ended, I slipped away quietly, leaving before the reception even began. No one noticed me. No one asked my name. Outside, the Texas air was warm, heavy with the scent of roses and expensive perfume from the guests drifting through the doors behind me. I stood under the evening sky for a moment, listening to the muffled music starting inside, and I realized the strangest thing. I wasn't crying. Not yet. The tears would come later, on the long ride back home. But right then, I felt something else, something colder, a kind of numbness like frost creeping across glass. I turned away from the building, holding my purse a little tighter, and boarded the bus bound for Savannah. The ride stretched through the night, and the next day, mile after mile, rolling under my feet like a long, tired sigh. I sat by the window, watching the world blur past. Trees, billboards, gas stations, endless roads, and somewhere between Louisiana and Mississippi, the tears finally came. They didn't come as sobs at first. They came quietly, like a leaking faucet you don't hear until the puddle has already formed. They slipped down my cheeks, warm and slow, carrying with them every memory I had tried to hold steady inside me. I thought of Samuel. I thought of the way he used to lift Naomi onto his shoulders and call her his sunshine. I thought of the day he died, how I clung to my youngest like she was the last warm ember in a dying fire. Maybe I had loved her too fiercely. Maybe I had sheltered her so much that she forgot where she came from. Maybe grief had taught me to hold her too close, so close she never learned how to hold me back. The bus hummed along the highway, and I felt every hum in my bones. I thought of Naomi's cold eyes when she said, "What are you doing here?" And that was when something hardened inside me, not out of spite, but out of survival, a fragile shell forming around a long broken heart. I made a decision. A small one at first, but it felt monumental. I would stop sending money. I would stop feeding a daughter who no longer saw me as her mother. I would step back, even if it meant she would fall. By the time the bus pulled into Savannah, my eyes were swollen and my legs were stiff, but I had made peace with the decision. Not because it felt good, but because it felt necessary. Home was waiting for me. My porch, my rocking chair, the quiet whisper of the wind moving through the pecan trees Samuel planted decades ago. I stepped into the house and dropped my purse onto the small wooden table. The silence felt heavier than usual. 3 days later, the phone rang. Not a gentle ring, a sharp, shrill, demanding ring. I picked it up, pressing it to my ear. "Mother?" Naomi's voice sliced through the line. Not sad, not uncertain, but angry. "Why didn't you send the money?" she demanded. No greeting, no warmth. "You know that money is mine. That is what Father wanted. You can't just keep it." Her tone got sharper with every breath, like she was trying to chisel away at my resolve. I closed my eyes. I let the silence sit between us until I knew I could speak without trembling. "What your father left you, Naomi," I said slowly, "was dignity. But that's something you still haven't learned to earn." She sucked in a breath, indignant, offended, stunned, and before she could spit out whatever sharp thing she had ready on her tongue, I hung up. My hands shook afterward, not from fear, from release, from the weight of years finally shifting. Then came 4 months of silence, 4 long, echoing months where I replayed every memory, every mistake, every sacrifice, wondering where motherhood ends and self-preservation begins. I spent nights on the porch, staring into the darkness, asking questions no mother ever wants to ask herself. Did I fail her? Did I spoil her? Did I love her too much or not enough? And yet, for the first time in years, the house felt still. Not empty, still. I breathed easier, even with the ache in my chest. Then came the knock on the door, a soft, hesitant knock, the kind you hear when someone is afraid of the answer on the other side. I opened it, and there she stood, Naomi, my child, my heartbreak, my lost girl. Her suitcase was beside her. Her eyes were swollen, raw, red-rimmed. Her shoulders slumped like a structure that had finally collapsed. Her lower lip trembled as she whispered, "Mother?" Rain tapped softly against the porch roof as I looked at her, at the ruin of a marriage built on sand, at the daughter who finally understood something the world had tried and failed to teach her. But that moment, that knock, that broken whisper, belongs to another part of the story. Because before I could open my arms and let her fall into them, I had to survive the long silence, the empty house, and the sharp edge of my own awakening. And that begins with the night I returned from Texas, heart splintered, but not yet defeated. When I stepped off that bus back in Savannah, the air felt heavier than I remembered, like the humidity itself sensed something broken inside me and didn't quite know how to hold it. I walked the familiar road home with the slow, deliberate steps of someone carrying too many memories on her back. Every porch light, every barking dog, every whiff of fried catfish drifting from a neighbor's kitchen made me feel both comforted and painfully exposed. I was returning to the life I had lived for decades, yet I wasn't the same woman who had left. I could feel it deep in my bones, in the tightness of my chest, in the strange mixture of grief and resolve that kept shifting inside me like two storms trying to collide. The house looked smaller when I reached it. Maybe I had shrunk from heartbreak, or maybe the house had learned how to stand without me while I was gone. I opened the door, stepped inside, and felt the stillness greet me like an old friend who wasn't sure whether to embrace or simply watch. My late husband, Samuel, had built this house with hands that smelled of engine grease and warm cedar. I could almost hear the echoes of his boots on the wooden floor if I stood very still. I set my purse on the entryway table, touched the spot on the wall where his tool rack once hung, and whispered, "You warned me, didn't you?" But the room stayed silent, and I knew the only answers that would ever matter were the ones I had tried to avoid for years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the ceiling fan creak in its slow, repetitive rhythm. My mind kept circling back to Naomi's face at the wedding, that flicker of annoyance, that stiff smile that wasn't meant for me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her turning away. I replayed her voice, the softness she used with others, the coldness she saved only for me. It wasn't anger that kept me awake. It was disbelief, the kind that wraps around your ribs like a tightening rope. I sat up at some point, wiping my eyes with the corner of the blanket. The room was dark, but I reached for the lamp on my nightstand anyway. When the warm light filled the room, I stared at the framed photo of Naomi on her high school graduation day. She had her arm around my waist, leaning into me as if she couldn't imagine a future without her mother right beside her. Her smile in the photo was genuine, bright, effortless, wide enough to show the tiny gap between her front teeth that she used to call her lucky space. I traced her face with my fingertip and whispered, "Where did we go wrong, baby?" But the truth was not a single moment. It was 1,000 moments stacked on top of each other like fragile glass. My fear of losing her after Samuel died, my need to keep her close, her growing craving for praise and attention from the world instead of from her own family. Every mother makes mistakes, but I had made mine with the best intentions, and that ended up being the sharpest irony of all. I spent the next 2 days moving like a shadow through my own home. I made tea, but didn't drink it. I warmed leftover stew, but barely touched it. I tried sweeping the porch, pulling weeds, folding laundry, trying to anchor myself in small routines so I wouldn't drift too far inside the storm of my thoughts. The decision to stop sending money had felt strong when I made it, almost righteous. But once home, that strength flickered. Guilt has a way of clawing its way back into a mother's heart, even when the child in question slams the door behind her and walks away without looking back. But then the phone rang, that sharp, angry ring, and any guilt I had left dissolved like salt thrown into a fire. Naomi's voice had sliced through the line with accusation, entitlement, and disdain. When I hung up on her, I stood in the kitchen for a long, silent minute, staring at the receiver like it might burst into flames from the heat of her anger. My heart was pounding, not because I regretted my words, but because they felt like the first real truth I had spoken in years. After that call, the silence returned, but it was louder. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I found new routines to occupy my time, attending church more regularly, bringing pies to the Saturday potlucks, helping old Mr. Thompson down the street when his arthritis flared up. I spent afternoons sitting on the porch swing Samuel built, listening to the wind move through the pecan trees. At night, I wrote in a small spiral notebook, the one Naomi had given me years ago when she said I should write down memories before you forget stuff. I wrote not because I feared forgetting, but because I needed to remember what love looked like before it got distorted. One afternoon in the 3rd month of silence, my neighbor and dear friend, Beverly, came over with a basket of warm biscuits. Beverly was one of those women who could spot sadness at 100 yards, and she wouldn't hesitate to walk right into your kitchen, set down comfort food, and sit in silence with you until you talked. She had known me since before Naomi was born. She knew every vulnerable part of me and refused to let me sink beneath the weight of my own heartbreak. We sat on the porch, passing the biscuits back and forth. When she finally spoke, she said, "You look like you're carrying a storm in your chest, Mabel." Her voice was soft, but her eyes were steady. I didn't want to unload everything, not at first, but once I started speaking, the words tumbled out, clumsy and heavy. I told her about the wedding, the look Naomi gave me, the words she said, the way I stood in the back like a stranger. I told her about the phone call, about the money, about the silence that followed. She listened without interrupting, without judgment. When I finally ran out of breath, she placed her warm hand over mine and said, "Sometimes love spoils the fruit, honey. You watered her so much, you forgot roots need to grow deep, not just wide." She gave me a sad smile. Now she's learning how to grow on her own, hard way or not. Her words struck me like a truth I had been waiting for. I looked at the road in front of the house, the way it curled around the oak trees, the way it stretched toward places I had never been. I thought about Naomi somewhere far away in Texas, living a life I had never been allowed to see, much less touch. For the first time, I wondered, what had she truly found there? What had she believed she deserved? And what did she lose in exchange for this man she barely knew? The silence continued into the 4th month. Life moved in slow, rhythmic circles, like a washing machine tumbling through cycles I could predict, but not fully control. Every now and then, I would catch myself staring at the phone, wondering if it might ring. Sometimes I dreamed of Naomi calling, her voice softer, asking if she could come home. Other nights, I dreamed of her standing in front of me at the wedding, saying something different, something warm, instead of words that carved deep lines into my heart. Then one morning, rain pattered against the windows in a soft, steady rhythm. I had just finished sweeping the kitchen floor when I heard it. A knock at the door. A hesitant, uncertain knock. A knock that sounded like fear wearing shoes. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the door, and opened it. Naomi. She stood under the porch roof, rainwater clinging to her hair, her dress wrinkled, her suitcase at her feet like it had given up before she did. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying, her lips trembling. For a moment, the world went still. The rain, the breath in my lungs, even the memory of her cold voice months earlier, everything paused. "Mother," she whispered. It wasn't a greeting. It was a confession. Her voice cracked open something in me that I had kept locked tight, an old ache, an older love, and something deeper than both. I didn't speak right away. I simply looked at her, searching her face for the girl I used to know. And slowly, painfully, I found her. Beneath the fear, beneath the pride, beneath the wreckage of choices she had never fully understood. Her shoulders sagged. She clutched the handle of her suitcase like it was the only solid thing keeping her upright. Tears slid down her cheeks, mixing with the rain. "He had a wife," she finally said, choking on the words. "A wife, Mother, and a daughter. A daughter my age." Her breath hitched. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I felt my knees weaken. I reached for the doorframe to steady myself. The image of Edward Coleman, polished, older, charming, flashed in my mind, and I remembered the way he held Naomi at the wedding, the way he scanned the room with detached confidence, a man with a double life. A man who took my daughter's innocence and wrapped it around his own selfish desires. Naomi wiped her nose with the back of her hand like a child. "I left," she said. "I left, Mother. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't breathe." She looked down at her suitcase. I didn't know anywhere else to go. My heart broke, but it also pieced itself back together in a way I hadn't expected. Because in that moment, I realized something powerful. Love had not abandoned me. It had simply transformed. I stepped back and opened my arms. She collapsed into them, sobbing violently, her whole body trembling against mine. I held her the way I had held her at 7 years old, at 13, at 18. Except this time, I wasn't holding a fragile girl. I was holding a woman shattered by the consequences of her own choices. She sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Her tears were hot against my skin. Mine stayed inside, not out of coldness, but because something in me had settled, anchored, strengthened. "Let it out," I whispered. "Let it all out." We stood there for a long time, the rain forming a soft curtain around us, hiding us from the rest of the world. When she finally pulled away, I brushed a strand of wet hair from her face and said the words she needed more than anything. "You're home." But I knew, deep in my bones, deep in the quiet parts of my soul, that welcoming her home was only the beginning of a longer, harder journey. Healing is never immediate. Forgiveness is never simple. And love, real love, demands a clarity she had never learned until now. Still, I guided her inside. I closed the door behind us, and I prayed that this time she would not run from the home she once abandoned. Naomi slept for almost 14 hours that first night back home. I could hear her steady breathing from the hallway whenever I passed by, soft and fragile, as if her lungs were relearning how to rest after years of pretending everything was fine. I stood there more than once, one hand pressed lightly against the doorframe, listening. It felt like listening to a memory, familiar, distant, painful. A part of me wanted to open the door and smooth her hair the way I used to when she was little, but another part held me back. She was not the same girl who fell asleep next to her stuffed rabbit and woke crying for her daddy. She was a woman now, broken in different ways, and I had to be careful not to fix her the wrong way again. The house felt different with her in it, fuller somehow, as if it had been waiting for her to return all this time. But I also felt the weight of everything we hadn't said. The wedding, the accusation over the phone, the 3 years she had lived a life I knew nothing about. The silence between us was a raw, stretching thing, like a rope pulled too tight, unsure whether it would snap or loosen. When she finally opened her door late the next morning, she looked smaller, her shoulders curled inward, her hair tangled from sleep, her eyes red and swollen. She stood barefoot in the hallway, clutching the blanket around her shoulders like a shield. I saw the child in her again, the one Samuel had adored, the one I had tried so hard to protect from every sorrow life could bring. That old instinct rose in me like a tide, but I pushed it down. Love had gotten me into trouble before. The kind of love that smothers, the kind that mistakes shelter for strength. She lifted her eyes to mine, hesitant. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded and stepped aside, letting her pass into the kitchen. She moved slowly, like each step required its own decision. She sat at the table while I poured 2 mugs of chamomile tea. The steam rose gently between us, forming a small, warm barrier. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I studied her hands that once clung to my apron strings, hands that now shook as she wrapped them around the mug. "Mother," she finally whispered, "I messed up. I messed up so badly." Her voice cracked, and the sound of it felt like a sudden bruise blooming inside my chest. "Tell me," I said softly. She stared into her tea, watching the ripples tremble across the surface. "He wasn't who I thought he was," she said. "Edward made everything look so perfect at first. He said all the right things, bought me nice dinners, flew me out to places I'd never been. He made me feel seen." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "I guess I wanted to feel grown, independent, like I didn't need anybody anymore." The admission hurt more than I expected. I'd given her everything I could, but she had wanted something more. Or maybe something else entirely. "When I moved to Austin," she continued, "I thought he was offering me a life I deserved. But once I got there, it was like I had stepped into a world where nothing was really mine. I wasn't allowed to work. He said my job was to focus on being beautiful. I wasn't allowed to make friends. He said friends would fill my head with nonsense." Her voice softened into something hollow. "I thought he was protecting me. I thought he was helping me." Her hand tightened around the mug until her knuckles turned pale. But he wasn't. He was controlling everything. My clothes, my meals, who I talked to, where I went. I didn't even realize it at first. By the time I understood, I felt trapped. A cold heaviness settled inside me. I had always imagined Naomi was living comfortably, maybe even luxuriously, not imprisoned behind expensive gifts and false affection. "How did you find out about his wife?" I asked, keeping my voice steady though my heart lurched. Her breath shuddered. "She came to his office, the real wife." She closed her eyes, shaking her head. "I was there dropping off some documents. When she walked in, she looked at me like she already knew everything. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just stared at me with this pity. Her voice broke again. She told me she'd been married to him for 22 years. She showed me a picture of their daughter. And mother, her face crumpled. She's my age. A tremor went through her shoulders, and I reached out slowly, placing my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. She let out a small sob that seemed to travel through both of us. He told me it was over with her, she whispered. He said they were separated, but they weren't. They were still living together, still sharing a bed. I was just... She swallowed hard. I was just a distraction, something new. The tears she had been trying to hold back finally spilled over. I handed her a tissue, and she pressed it to her cheeks. I packed my suitcase and left that night, she said, wiping her eyes. I didn't want to call you. Not after what I said. Not after the wedding. But when I walked out of that house, there was nowhere else that felt like home. Those words hit harder than she could have known. They pierced something inside me that had been numb for months. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the woman she wanted to be, nor the girl I had sheltered, but someone caught between the two, trying to patch herself together with trembling fingers. "You're safe now," I whispered. But even as I said it, I felt a shift in myself. The realization that safety meant something different this time. I couldn't protect her by smothering her. I couldn't save her by sacrificing myself. I needed to let her rebuild, not rebuild her. She stayed in the house for weeks, sleeping long hours, moving slowly through the rooms like she was learning them again. She helped me cook, helped sweep the porch, helped fold laundry. Sometimes she was quiet and reflective, other times restless and irritable, pacing from room to room as though trying to outrun the memories she hadn't yet processed. Trauma doesn't just vanish when someone comes home. It lingers like smoke in a closed room, settling into every corner. Her brothers, Caleb and Isaiah, came over a few days after she returned. They didn't know the details yet, only that she was back. When Caleb saw her standing in the doorway, he blinked hard and swallowed the lump in his throat. Isaiah hugged her cautiously, like she might crumble if he squeezed too tight. I watched the three of them from the living room, feeling an ache rise in me that I hadn't felt in years. A quiet, nostalgic ache for the family we used to be, the one we had lost piece by piece. But the ache softened when I saw a different expression on Naomi's face. Shame? Yes, but also gratitude. A daughter coming home does not always come home whole, but coming home at all means she trusts the ground beneath her feet. One evening after dinner, she joined me on the porch. The crickets were humming in the grass, and the air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle. She sat next to me on the swing without asking, her legs tucked under her like she used to do as a little girl. "Mother," she said quietly, "I want to start helping at the shop." I turned my head slightly. "The shop?" "With Caleb and Isaiah," she clarified, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I want to learn something useful, something real." Her voice had changed. It wasn't filled with entitlement or impatience. It was grounded, steady, like soil beginning to pack itself after a long storm. I saw Samuel in her then. Just a flicker, but enough to make my chest warm. "I think that's a fine idea," I said. She smiled for the first time since coming home. It wasn't bright or confident. It was small, almost shy, but it was real. The next morning, she woke early and dressed in jeans and one of Isaiah's old t-shirts. She tied her hair back, grabbed her shoes, and headed to the family shop. I watched her walk down the driveway, her steps uncertain but determined. It felt like watching a seed drop into the earth after years of drifting in the wind. Over the next weeks, she threw herself into learning. Caleb taught her how to change oil and replace a tire. Isaiah showed her how to log inventory and talk to customers politely. She got grease on her hands, dirt under her nails, and pride in her voice when she talked about the small things she had learned. "I didn't know I could do this," she said one evening, rubbing her hands clean with a rag. "I didn't know I could do anything real." There it was, the realization she had needed all along, a kind of awakening, a slow, steady reclamation of herself. She wasn't chasing attention anymore. She wasn't clinging to promises wrapped in silk and gold. She was building something simple, something honest. But her growth brought its own kind of turbulence. There were nights when she woke up crying in the dark, and I would hear her through the thin walls. trying to smother the sound with her pillow. There were mornings when she avoided looking at herself in the mirror. There were afternoons when she snapped at small things, a dropped spoon, a burnt pot of rice, because the bigger pain still lived under her skin. But healing is never a straight line. It curls and bends and doubles back. It cuts deep before it reveals anything beautiful. One afternoon, Naomi found an old photo album in the closet. She brought it to the porch where I was sitting and placed it on the table. "Can we look through these?" she asked softly. We did, page by page, memory by memory. We lingered over the picture of her sitting on Samuel's lap in the shop, holding a wrench in her tiny hands. Naomi traced his face with her fingertip, her eyes filling with tears again. "I forgot how much he loved us," she whispered. "He always did," I said. She nodded, her eyes drifting downward. Then, after a moment, she spoke again, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Mother, did you ever think I wouldn't come back?" The question hit me with a sudden heaviness I wasn't prepared for. "I worried," I said honestly, "but I never believed you'd stay away forever." She looked at me then with an expression I hadn't seen since she was a child. Vulnerable, searching, hopeful. "I didn't deserve to come back," she said. "Maybe not," I whispered, "but you needed to. And sometimes needing is more important than deserving." The wind rustled through the pecan leaves above us, scattering shadows across her face. She reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I know," I said, "and trying is how we begin again." But even as I said those words, I felt something faint but unmistakable rising inside me. A warning, a distant rumble. Healing had brought Naomi home, but healing often stirs up the people who benefited from someone staying lost. And Edward Coleman was not the kind of man who let go easily. The next part of our story, the part that revealed just how far his lies reached, began the same way all storms begin, with a single, unexpected disturbance. And it arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, as a letter addressed in handwriting I had never seen before slid through my mailbox slot like a snake slithering under a door. The envelope lay on my kitchen table like a sleeping threat. I remember how the afternoon sun fell across it in a thin, accusing line, catching the edges of the cream-colored paper. My name was written in a handwriting I did not recognize, elegant, slanted, almost rehearsed. At first glance, it looked harmless, but something about the curve of the letters made my stomach tighten. Mothers develop a strange instinct over the years, a quiet sense that tightens before the storm arrives. As soon as I saw that envelope, I felt the air shift around me. Naomi was at the shop when the letter came. I stood there alone in the kitchen, the ticking clock on the wall suddenly louder than usual. I didn't open it right away. I made myself a cup of tea first, letting the steam rise into my face while I steadied my breath. I thought of Samuel, how he used to say that bad news arrived dressed like good manners. "Trouble always knocks politely," he'd joke. "It only starts yelling once you open the door." I sighed and slid a finger under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper. The words were written in the same slanted hand as the envelope, and as soon as I saw the name at the bottom, my heart gave a slow, weary lurch. It wasn't Edward. It was his wife. Her message was short, but every sentence carried weight. "I am writing because I believe you deserve the truth." Naomi was not the only one he lied to. He has drained several accounts, including the ones he told our daughter were saved for her education. He took jewelry, sold vehicles, forged signatures. He may attempt to contact Naomi again. For her sake, please do not let him. I am pursuing legal action. If you ever need to talk, call me. At the bottom was a phone number. No threats, no accusations, only a quiet, exhausted plea. My hands shook as I read it again and again, each time feeling the anger rise like heat under my skin. Not a loud anger, a cold one, heavy and flat, like a stone pulled from the bottom of a river. A mother's anger, a woman's anger, the kind that doesn't scream but sharpens. I folded the letter and set it aside. The room around me felt different, as if the walls themselves had taken a breath and held it. So he wasn't finished with her. Of course he wasn't. Men like Edward never closed a door unless they had another one waiting to open. And Naomi, my bruised, healing child, had slipped through his fingers too quietly, too cleanly. He hadn't gotten whatever it was he still wanted. Money, perhaps, control, or simply the sick satisfaction of knowing she still bent when he pushed. I paced the kitchen slowly, each step heavy with the weight of the life he had stolen from her, the shame he'd carved into her heart, the confidence he'd chipped away piece by piece, the love he had counterfeited with practiced ease. By the time Naomi came home that evening, my resolve had settled into something hard and immovable. She walked into the kitchen smelling faintly of motor oil and warm asphalt, tired but proud. Her hair was pulled back in a messy braid, and she had a dark smudge of grease across her cheek that she hadn't noticed. When she saw me standing by the table, her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I handed her the letter. She read it slowly. Her hands trembled by the time she reached the bottom. She sank into a chair, her breath unsteady. "I thought I was done with him," she whispered. "I thought leaving was enough." I sat next to her. "Leaving was the beginning," I said. "But healing doesn't end with walking away. It ends when the person who hurt you no longer has a place inside you." Her eyes welled with tears. Not the panicked tears of a broken woman, but the frustrated tears of someone who was tired of feeling small. "I hate him," she said softly, and I believed her. But hate alone never saves anybody. Sometimes it only keeps the wound open. She looked up at me, confusion tightening her features. "What do we do?" I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We tell the truth." The next day, Naomi and her brothers went to the courthouse. She filed her statement, adding her voice to the chorus of those Edward had deceived. It was not an easy day. Her hands shook as she held the pen. Her voice cracked as she spoke to the clerk. But she did it. She stood there, trembling but resolute, and she told the truth she had once been too blind to see. Caleb stayed by her side the whole time, a steady arm across her shoulders. Isaiah waited in the parking lot with cold sodas and a blanket in case she needed to cry in the truck afterward. She did. Not out of helplessness, but out of release. And as I watched her from the passenger seat, my heart swelled with a strange mixture of grief and pride. It was the quiet pride that comes when a child walks through fire and comes out with new skin. A few days later, Edward called. The phone rang just after sunset, when the sky outside was painted in deep, bruised purples. Naomi was in the living room, folding laundry. I was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. When the phone vibrated on the counter, I didn't recognize the number, but she did. She froze. Her hands tightened on the towel she was holding. "Do you want me to answer it?" I asked. She swallowed weakly. "No," she whispered. "I need to hear what he has to say." The moment she picked up, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Naomi," he said, his voice so smooth it made my skin crawl. "Finally, I've been trying to reach you." I stepped closer quietly, not to eavesdrop, but to let her know she wasn't alone. Naomi's posture stiffened. "What do you want?" He sighed dramatically. "There's been a misunderstanding. My wife is confused. You shouldn't involve yourself with her lies." I watched my daughter's jaw tighten. "She's not lying," Naomi said. "Yes, she is," he snapped. Then his voice softened. "Baby, you know how people get when they're angry. She's jealous. She knows you and I had something special." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The ease of his manipulation, the practiced sweetness, the way he twisted words like threads. But Naomi didn't flinch. "We didn't have something special," she said. "You lied to me. You used me," he scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. You were lonely. I helped you. You owed me." She cut him off, her voice steady. "I don't owe you anything. Not anymore." His silence on the other end was brief but sharp, the kind of silence that reveals a man's true nature. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its velvet softness. "You think running home to mommy is going to fix everything?" he hissed. "You think you can embarrass me and get away with it?" Naomi's breath trembled, but she did not break. She lifted her chin. "Yes," she said, "I do." And then she hung up, just like that. For a long moment, she stood there, staring at the silent phone in her hand. Then her shoulders began to shake. Not with fear, not with regret, with relief. She turned to me, eyes wet, chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. "I did it," she whispered. I finally told him no. I wrapped my arms around her, and for the first time since she'd come home, I felt her stand tall inside her own skin. But life has a way of testing us after we've grown. 2 weeks later, a formal notice arrived from the courthouse. Edward's wife's case had expanded, and Naomi was now officially listed among the victims. Not suspects, Not accomplices, victims. Something about seeing that word printed clearly on legal paper struck her deeply. She held the form with both hands, her eyes widening slowly. Then she looked at me with a strange expression, part grief, part understanding. "I wasn't stupid," she said quietly. "I was just misled." "You were loved," I corrected gently. "And people who crave love are the easiest for predators to find." She nodded, and for the first time, I think she believed it. The case progressed quickly. Edward's finances were audited, his activities tracked. The wife, steady and composed, provided evidence he hadn't expected her to have. Other women came forward. Other lies unraveled. Word spread through Austin like wildfire. Before long, he was arrested. Naomi and I sat on the porch the day the news reached us. She held her knees close to her chest, looking at the road stretching toward town. The afternoon sun filtered through the pecan branches above us, shedding soft, dappled shadows across her face. "Do you feel better?" I asked gently. She took a long, thoughtful breath. "I feel awake," she said. And she was. She was awake in ways she had never been before. Not blind, not hopeful to a fault, not trying to outrun the lessons life had been trying to teach her. Just awake. In the months that followed, she flourished. She learned how to rebuild engines. She took night classes. She made friends at the community center. She laughed again. Not timidly, not apologetically, but with the unguarded joy of someone who had been lost and found herself. Sometimes she sat beside me on the porch, her head leaning on my shoulder as we watched the fireflies spark in the summer dusk. And sometimes I would think back to that wedding, the roses, the chandelier, the cold look in her eyes. The question that had pierced me deeper than anything I'd ever felt. "What are you doing here?" Now, she knew the answer. I was there because love does not vanish just because someone forgets who gave it to them. I was there because mothers show up again and again, even when they are not wanted. I was there because I had always belonged, in her life, in her story, in the place she returned to when the world failed her. She didn't know I was coming, but I always knew she'd come back. And she did. She came back stronger. She came back wiser. She came back to herself. What would you have done in my place? Tell me where you're listening from. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if this story touched you, consider using the super thanks to support more stories like this one. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time.